Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
Well, a Supreme Court decision that has as many opinions almost as there are justices, but as you just heard, a 7-2 decision on the merits of whether the Peace Cross, the Bladensburg Peace Cross, can stay. It does stay. This was a lawsuit brought by the American Humanist Association. It's been in place, the Bladensburg Peace Cross, since 1925. It has stood as a tribute to 49 area soldiers who gave their lives in the First World War. So it was a World War I memorial. 89 years after the dedication of the cross, a lawsuit was filed challenging its constitutionality. The challenge was that people were, the plaintiffs were offended just knowing the cross was there. That was an offense to them. 7 justices of the Supreme Court said that cross is constitutional.
And this is a cross, again, it's been there since 1925. Stood as a tribute to, it was specific to the 49 area soldiers in this part of Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., who gave their lives in the First World War. And you talked about the 89 years. You've got this lawsuit by the angry atheist, and that's what they are. They get sick when they see these memorials. They feel like outsiders when they see these memorials. The truth is, our country and places like we were just celebrating the 75th anniversary of D-Day are filled with these kind of religious memorials. And as Justice Alito said, just because it's a cross, you don't start taking down the arms of the cross or removing it and changing the memorial because of that. So what I think is, even though you've got all these different opinions, it's 7-2 out of the U.S. Supreme Court that this cross remains in Bladensburg, and it's good for other monuments like it because it shows that there is a big majority on the court that says we don't start tearing down memorials from the 1920s and 1930s. Now, Justice Kavanaugh did bring up a good point. He said in his brief, how long, or I think it was Justice Gorsuch actually, he said, in his opinion, how long is long enough for a memorial? And that is something the Supreme Court saying, well, this is really old, so it's not really an issue. That's where, like Justice Breyer, who was more liberal on the court, did not join Ginsburg and Sotomayor, but instead was for the cross. So was Kagan with this historical argument. But again, when does something become historical enough? And one of our previous cases was also cited by the lead opinion writer, Justice Alito, who delivered the court's opinion today.
So we'll get into that after the break. Justice Alito used our opinion in the case I argued almost 10 years ago, the Pleasant Grove case involving the Ten Commandments monument. On page 6 of the opinion, it reads, although we do not know precisely why the committee chose the cross, it is unsurprising that the committee and many others commemorating World War I adopted a symbol so widely associated with that wrenching event. So again, Professor Hutchinson pointing to the history, the symbolism of the cross representing a symbol of sacrifice, more than just it's of course a religious symbol, but even more.
Absolutely. And it's important to note, given the history of this particular monument, that this statue, this monument, has acquired additional historical significance. Tearing it down would not be a neutral act by the government.
Yeah, and they said that too, by the way. That would show hostility towards religion, which the Establishment Clause actually prohibits. So a big win. 7-2, the Supreme Court says the cross stays, not a violation of the Establishment Clause. Your support for the ACLJ helps us get involved in all of these cases. In fact, in that case, a 10-year-old precedent of the ACLJs at the Supreme Court was one of the bases upon which the court ruled. So that was great news. Lasting legacy of opinions that we've argued a decade ago being used today to defend religious liberty. You can support the work of the ACLJ in our Matching Challenge campaign, which means any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. You do that at aclj.org. That's aclj.org. Back with more in a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Well, it's interesting. Jordan just said he went to the Drudge Report, and what do they have?
The sub headline on the Supreme Court upholding the cross on public land, which is important right there, is that in italics it says defeat for atheists. I think this is this American Humanist Association is one of those angry atheist groups that wants to strip our country of our Judeo-Christian heritage, even going so far as to try and take down war memorials. And this one specifically was more like a gravestone to these 49 from the Bladensburg, Maryland area who served and died in World War I and whose bodies were not necessarily returned. It was not an easy process then to return bodies back to the United States. And so I think Kelly Shackelford's joining us now as well. So, Will, yeah.
Well, Kelly, congratulations on your case here. This is a big decision. Give us your reaction.
I'm thrilled, Jay and Jordan. We felt like we were going to win because if they tear down this memorial, they've got to go into Arlington and tear down. They got to go everywhere and tear down memorials. And so we felt like we were going to win, but we didn't know if it was going to be big or small. And I don't know if you've been able to parse the opinion yet, but this is big. The court said they're no longer applying Lemon.
Let me ask you about that, because that was one thing I've read, as much as you could read in the few minutes we had before we went on air. So I said there's almost as many opinions as there are justices here. Yeah. So as to the Lemon test, are there 5 justices, it looks like there are, saying Lemon does not apply?
There are 5 that say that, and I think the terminology is long-standing, monuments, memorials, or practices of long-standing history are presumptively constitutional, and Lemon is not appropriately applied in those type of cases. So we have our first hole blown through Lemon, which you and I both know has been a bad case that has led to all these attacks on religious freedom for 50 years. This is a great step in the right direction that I think we can now build on in other areas as well.
One of the things I was heartened by when the oral arguments took place was that Elena Kagan seemed to be in favor of keeping the monument up there. So and also Justice Breyer. And actually, on these cases, surprisingly, oftentimes they've gone the right way. So it always doesn't fall on ideological lines. Justice Ginsburg's dissent not particularly surprising with her view of it. What do you think the biggest takeaway here is, Kelly, on this case?
Well, it's we've got the 7-2 to uphold the memorial, but the thing we were looking for is can we really start to finally take a leg out from under Lemon? Because that's why the attacks on our nativity scenes, our religious symbols, and so we didn't know if we were going to get 5 to do that. They could have just said we're going to uphold this monument, but for 5 of them to say, look, Lemon is no longer going to be applied here. It's not workable, and we're going to consider our monuments, memorials, and longstanding practices like prayer before governments, et cetera, presumptively constitutional. We now have Lemon sort of one of the legs of the stool knocked out from under it, and I think it's just the beginning where maybe we can get back to the Constitution and away from what we all know is a bad case that's been used to sort of create a hostility to religion.
I mean, so many of the cases we've had over so many years, if you fall on the so-called Lemon test, Justice Scalia called it like a ghoul in a late-night horror show. It keeps shuffling around, and every time you put a stake in its heart, Justice Scalia said, they bring it back from the dead only when they want to scare, he said, little school children in Santa Maria School District. I thought it was interesting also, Kelly, and that the appreciating the history of what the cross represented here. I think that was important so that these decisions, when they're looking at a symbol that is clearly religious, I mean, no one denies that a Star of David or a cross is religious, but that it's more than just a religious symbol.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows what that cross was up for. It was up for those 49 men who died in that county. And I think it really was ridiculous that we keep having these attacks on our veterans memorials. And any of the religious symbols. And Ginsburg's dissent shows you how wrong this is. I mean, in her world, no religious symbols would be allowed across America. And that is not our country. We have religious symbols. We have secular symbols. We're religious people. We're the religious heritage. But we don't go and sniff out all the religious monuments and bulldoze or sandblast any religious phrases off of our, monuments and memorials. So her approach was really wrong, and I'm really glad that the court is finally moving in the right direction. And I think it's because we're getting more and more justices on the court who really feel like their job is to follow the original meaning of the Constitution, and as we do that, we're getting back to a better religious freedom that our country was based
I think there's also something significant here. You're talking about some contemporary events impact Supreme Court decisions. So Justice Alito, in his opinion, cites to the tragic fire at Notre Dame. He says, the recent tragic fire at Notre Dame in Paris provides a striking example. Although the French Republic rigorously enforces a secular public square, the cathedral remains a symbol of national importance to the religious and non-religious alike. Notre Dame is fundamentally a place of worship and retains great religious importance, but its meaning has broadened. For many, it is inextricably linked with the very idea of Paris and France. Speaking to the nation shortly after the fire, President Macron said that Notre Dame is our history, our literature, our imagination, the place where we survive epidemics, wars, liberation. It has been the epicenter of our life. I think that is a very significant statement. I'm going to go to Harry and Andy on that. Harry?
I think you're precisely correct. I think Justice Alito is precisely correct. And at the end of his opinion, he makes the following claim. The cross is undoubtedly a Christian symbol, but that fact should not blind us to everything else that the Bladensburg Cross has come to represent. So he's saying that a Christian symbol can represent more than religion. That's important for our heritage, it's important for patriotism, and it's important for binding us together as a nation.
But also, Andy, pointing out the history here makes a big difference.
I'm glad you cited the language and the opinion regarding Notre Dame de Paris, and it's important that we realize that the entire name of the cathedral is Notre Dame de Paris, Our Lady of Paris. Do you know the historical significance, the breadth and depth of the significance of that cathedral for Paris and for epicenter as the epicenter of the nation on the Lutetia, the island that the Romans founded, and the significance of that in history should not be lost, as President Macron said. The same thing applies to crosses and symbols in the United States.
Yep.
The significance of those must not be lost, not as religious emblems or symbols, but as symbols of the unity of the nation in our past.
So, Kelly, to you, congratulations on a job well done. You fought a long time on this case. I mean, this case seems to be, I think we go back decades on this case, but a great conclusion. Congratulations. And for those that don't know about Kelly's great organizations, First Liberty, go to firstliberty.org. We've been good friends for a long time, but Kelly, again, congratulations. Job well done.
Hey, thank you, Jay. It's been great battling together, and it's great to get a significant victory here for the whole team.
Great team effort. Thank you very, very, very much.
I was going to just echo what Kelly said, and this is that the shift in the court. So you think, we talked a lot about politics. We've had the president launch his official campaign Tuesday night. We've had the first Democrat debates begin next week. This is key. What Kelly said is that you're seeing a change in the court. A shift away from the Kennedys and those kind of more in-the-middle approaches to the Gorsuches and to the Kavanaugh approaches. I mean, these are different ways of looking at, especially when it comes to religion in the United States and our Judeo-Christian values and heritage in the United States. These were there was a period of time in the 60s and 70s during the Lemon test. I mean, these were losing cases.
You would lose these, absolutely.
You probably wouldn't even try to appeal them to the Supreme Court because you would lose. But this is how big of a shift there's been. And if you don't believe that elections have consequences, come November 3rd in 2020, there's going to be more Supreme Court justices to appoint whoever gets elected president.
No question about it.
And the way this will balance, I mean, again, you got 7-2 here, but it could easily go back to being these 5-4 type cases with a couple more vacancies on the court.
So I'm just going to go to Than in Washington. So you talk about this, you tie it right into the judicial nominations. This is a big example where those judicial nominations make a big difference. These two justices realize it. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, key votes here.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jay, I would just say my family and I live in Prince George's County. This was a memorial to our fallen neighbor, so a big victory. But you're right. I mean, we've said this time and time again on this broadcast, Jay. All of the other issues that we talk about, maybe the longest lasting legacy of these first 2 years of the Trump administration will be not only the justices, but the dozens of judges that have been nominated to circuit courts, another half dozen confirmed to district courts just this week, Jay. Look, there's a long way to go, but if there's another term here, if there's another 6 years of these judges, I mean, even the Ninth Circuit, Jay, of all things, even the Ninth Circuit, we might start getting favorable rulings out of. This is a very big issue. The makeup of the court, more rulings like this will follow if more of these justices are nominated.
I'm holding in my hand, the copy of the brief that you helped us file in this case. This is called an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief. They're bound and they're printed, and it was successful. And those of you who've been supporting the ACLJ for a long time, let me give you another thank you on that. In this opinion is cited a series of cases, including the Pleasant Grove case, which is a case I argued on behalf of our American Center for Law and Justice at the Supreme Court in 2010. And that decision came out, and a very positive decision, 9-0 in favor of a Ten Commandments monument. Justice Alito wrote the opinion in that case. He used the language of that case for this one. You build precedent upon precedent. That's what's at play here. So when you support the work of the ACLJ, you see the benefit of it even decades later. Your support for the ACLJ helps us get involved in all of these cases. In fact, in that case, a 10-year-old precedent of the ACLJ's at the Supreme Court was one of the bases upon which the court ruled. So that was great news. Lasting legacy of opinions that we've argued a decade ago being used today to defend religious liberty. You can support the work of the ACLJ in our Matching Challenge campaign, which means any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. You do that at aclj.org. That's aclj.org. Back with more in a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. If you're just joining us, the famous Peace Cross in Maryland is going to stay. A Supreme Court decision 7-2. 5 justices of the Supreme Court said the so-called Lemon Test, which was this 3-part test.
Yeah, we've got calls on this. We
Yeah.
should take. We
Let's
actually
go
have
ahead and take it.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Joseph on Facebook says, "What is this lemon law?" I think it's not the one involving cars that you buy that don't work well.
Let's take Dennis's
and
call.
Dennis calling in about it as
All right.
well. So we'll answer both their
Yep.
questions. Dennis in Indiana online too.
Hey, Dennis.
Hi, Jay. God bless you guys
Thanks.
for doing God's work in the courts for us.
Thanks.
Your timing is perfect. The lemon law, I knew very well it didn't have anything to do with cars. Would you mind explaining what that lemon case is?
Yeah, so the Lemon was a case. It was called the Lemon case. It was a case that came out almost 40 years ago, and it was a 3-part test for whether a particular practice or symbol violated what's called the Establishment Clause, which is where this whole church-state separation notion comes out of. And it was you had to have a secular purpose. What was the secular purpose of the cross? Was it the primary effect to endorse religion or not? Did it entangle the government with religion or not? And it made it, Harry, you've written extensively about this. The test was so unworkable that they would use it when they wanted to use it, ignore it when they wanted to ignore it. And like I said, late Justice Scalia called it a ghoul in a late-night horror show.
And I think Justice Scalia was precisely correct. Basically, the test is incomprehensible. And when I used to teach law, I would argue that it was simply a test designed to bedevil law students, but no one really understood.
And frighten school board attorneys.
And precisely. So one of the things that the test doesn't seem to understand is a particular rule, monument, policy can have multiple purposes. It could have a secular purpose. It could have it could be a Christian symbol. It could honor, for instance, the war dead, as is the case here. Now, the principal effect of the policy must not be to advance nor inhibit religion. And so the question becomes, does, for instance, the Bladensburg Cross advance religion? Now, it's also important to keep in mind that individuals that have a hostility toward religion love the Lemon versus Kurtzman test in part because they can use it to block the use of religious symbols that are part of our collective heritage. And so it's very, very important that the Supreme Court develops, going forward, skepticism about the Lemon versus Kurtzman test. I think that advances freedom of religion in the United States. I think this particular test should be consigned to the dustbin of history.
I am particularly pleased with this opinion because, again, they're utilizing a case that I had argued, the Summum case, Pleasant Grove. And there's another aspect of it that I want to talk about. And it's an argument I actually made. There was this idea that when the United States accepted the Statue of Liberty from France, the group Summum that wanted to post this kind of anti-Ten Commandments monument, they said, well, if you took the monument, if you take the Ten Commandments, you got to take the anti-Ten Commandments. So I argued at the Supreme Court when I argued Summum 10 years ago that that means if you take when the United States accepted the gift from the people of France for the Statue of Liberty, that if someone wants to then demand that you take the Statue of Tyranny, you'd have to do that. And Justice Alito wrote that opinion too and said, no, you don't, which was exactly right. And he used Summum in this case. He said, third, just as the purpose of maintaining a monument, symbol, or practice may evolve, the message conveyed may change over time. He cites Summum. Consider, for example, the message of the Statue of Liberty, which began as a monument to solidarity and friendship between France and the United States, and only decades later became to be seen as a beacon welcoming immigrants to a land of freedom. And again, it shows the nature and scope of what these arguments were. And again, what it tells you, especially those of you that support the work of the ACLJ, something we argued a decade ago is being applied 10 years later to support this Cross case. And I think, Andy, it speaks again to the longevity. I mean, I've been doing cases before the Supreme Court for almost 40 years. The longevity of doing this, and that you still see these opinions coming up years, decades later.
They're not going to go away,
Nope.
Jay, as long as you have people who don't understand history. And that's what the problem is with this humanist movement, or whatever they're called, the American Humanist Association. They don't understand the significance of monuments, sacred space, history, and things of that nature, which, as you said, and quoted from Justice Alito's opinion, the Statue of Liberty begins as one thing, a symbol between solidarity between France and the United States, and it evolves into something that my grandparents and yours, Jay, who both came in through Ellis Island, they said, well, I said to my grandmother once, what was the thing that you remember most? And in her broken English, she said, Statue of Liberty. And that was the thing that stood out in her mind.
Right.
Liberty and freedom, which she was freeing from in Eastern Europe and Turkey, which they did not have.
Right.
And they see this as in the United States as something that is evocative of something that is the very fundamental heart and core of our nation, freedom. It's not a religious symbol. It is no longer that. It is a symbol of the United States of America and our history.
Let's go to Michael calling in from Georgia on line one. Michael, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Michael, you're on the air.
Thank you for all you guys do.
Sure.
And I really appreciate this about the cross. I'm a combat veteran from Vietnam.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. And I brought my best buddy. We joined and went together. He died over there, and his family requested I bring his body back. Those crosses represent not just Christianity, but men that gave their lives, their blood, their all. And if they get that cross, they'll go after the Vietnam War memorial, World War II memorial. They won't stop.
Well, they pointed to the justices pointed to this. They talked about the cross being a symbol of sacrifice. First, these cases often concern monuments, symbols, or practices that were first established long ago, and in such cases, identifying the original purpose may be difficult, but it's not determinative as to the end result. In other words, the fact is that the cross, while it clearly is a religious symbol, which Harry, Justice Alito says is a religious symbol, but it's much more than that.
For some, the monument, for instance, is symbolic of a resting place for ancestors who never returned home. For others, it is a place for the community to gather and honor all veterans and their sacrifices for our nation. So it's very important to note that this monument has multiple purposes and it provides multiple benefits to the entire community. In essence, the globalized elites want to destroy, in my opinion at least, the notion of community, the notion of a nation. And they want, in some cases, open borders. In other words, they want to destroy sovereignty and the rule of law. That's their ultimate goal, their ultimate objective.
You know, I've visited this cross. I know for our Facebook and Periscope audience, they've seen some of the video from a while back. This case has been going on a long time, like you said, Dad, over a decade, to try and fight angry atheists trying to fight to take this cross down.
We've been involved in this cross case for a long time. In fact, Jordan went out to the cross when it was first challenged. Here's the video.
This is Jordan Sekulow, and we're here at the Peace Cross. It's been here since 1925 here in Bladensburg, Maryland. It only took us about 15 minutes from our offices in Washington, D.C. As you can see, we're basically in the middle of a pretty busy intersection and road. You see the word courage there. You see the star, a golden star that says U.S., and we're going to take you around the memorial, but I wanted you to kind of get an image of what we've been talking about on radio, and here we are in Bladensburg, Maryland at the cross. Think about, folks, how tragic it would be to take this memorial down. It's been here since 1925. This has the names of the 49 members from Prince George's County who died in the Great War between 1917 and 1918. This is the memorial we want to protect and make sure that if a group of angry atheists isn't able to strip our country of heritage like this in a World War I memorial to those who fought and gave their lives for liberty, for the liberty of the world.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast today. Your support of the ACLJ makes victories like the one at the Supreme Court possible. And we encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ. We're in a matching challenge campaign, which means any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. You do that at aclj.org. That's aclj.org. We'll see you next week.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org.